How does a career-ending injury for a young athlete become the starting point for a decade-long career in game development? Today's guest is Justin Scott. He's a senior game developer with 10 years of experience, but his story started from a hospital bed, where a broken knee had led him to discover the world of modding. In this conversation, we will talk exactly about that spark that ignited his whole career. What I really enjoyed about our conversation is how Justin actually is a huge believer on learning the hard way. He argues that a true understanding comes only with grappling with the fundamentals. This had really motivated me into starting my own journey into coding as well. But the main reason I had Justin on is because of his unique way of sharing the human side of game development on his own social media. See, Justin is also a content creator. But the reason his content had resonated with me so much is because he shares exactly that part of game development no one wants to share with you, which is the failure, the frustration, the journey. That is exactly what I also try to do with my own content. This conversation is not about shying away from reinventing the wheel. In fact, we talk about how reinventing the wheel and learning how to reinvent the wheel leads you to eventually being able to build the bike or even maintaining the bike. Because if you understand the concept of how a wheel works, you're more likely to fix the wheel if you face issues, which is something we face a lot in game development, but I'll leave more for that in the conversation. I hope you will enjoy this one as much as I did. Without further ado, Justin. Hello, Justin. How's it going today?
Hello. Yeah, it's going really good, actually. It's a
Perfect.
nice, sunny but cold day in the Netherlands.
It's very snowy here. But anyway, I would like to ask you to introduce yourself for people who have maybe no idea about you.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm Justinbieshaar. I'm from the Netherlands. I live in The Hague. I am a game developer, a senior game developer, mainly on programming. Been doing it for almost a decade now. Actually, next month is my 10-year anniversary working in industry.
Wow.
And I worked on a wide variety of studios as well. First 5 years, I worked at a studio that was for online multiplayer and social casino games. And then I moved to Paladin Studios, which was a entertainment studio where I worked with really cool projects such as Cut the Rope and My Tamagotchi Forever, and also a lot of stuff under the hood that never came out. Unfortunately, then like a whole rough path of my career started, where when Paladin Studios had forcibly to be closed because of state of the industry, no work for hire, it was a bit tough. Then I moved to Engine Software, working on a project with Ubisoft, which was the Monopoly 2024 for console, which is my only and first console game at the moment. And then I moved to more casual mobile games at Voodoo, and currently just started working at Lessmore, which is also a mobile game studio. So mainly my experience is in mobile gaming, but I also always like to just get my experience up with programming to be able to create everything. But mobile is definitely the most experience I have.
Yeah.
And besides that, I also do a lot of content creation, especially on social media like TikTok and Instagram, sharing a bit more about like how it is to be a programmer, sharing tips and trying to inspire others. Because, well, for me as well, when I started, I was always kind of afraid of like how the industry is and how it all works. So I really felt like, especially when I started this, to give something back to the industry and share to others that, well, if I can make it, then you can do it as well.
Yeah, I love that.
And share some insights of how it is to work for a game studio, etc.
I feel like you do that very well in your content. I mean, that's how I got to know you. I was, going through Instagram and saw one of they're like 30 seconds, would you say, most of them, the shorts that you do, the reels?
Yeah.
But they're very relatable, and there's just this empathy to them that you don't much see in the content creation world, because we always celebrate like the end results and we always celebrate the good moment and the success, but we never really cover the what you cover, for example, which is like a message of like well, remember the first step of like whatever is to the first, what is it like? One of the things that you shared lately, I forgot it. Maybe you could share with
Yeah,
the viewers.
for example, it's more about progress and not knowing everything.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
I also like to share a lot of like what is normal. That it's normal to have a day that nothing works, or that it's normal that
Yep.
you have to fail first to learn, and that it's normal to
But
keep
like,
learning no matter how good you are.
absolutely. I think that's not shown at all. Like you really just
No.
see the other thing, which is like what. And I feel like we need to show more of the blood and sweat and tear that go into like game development, or show support to those moments, right? Like, and I feel
Absolutely.
that's what a lot of people are watching your content, and it's resonating with them, and it takes so much empathy, or also like connection with yourself, like confidence, call it whatever you want to call it, to be able to be vulnerable, but not just vulnerable while
Absolutely.
you're crying in front of the camera, but vulnerable, encouraging vulnerable.
Yeah.
I feel like you do that very well.
No, but I also must say it's also kind of like, well, meditative is not the right word, I guess, but it kind of feels for me sometimes like that. Like I had times, that's especially also how I started when I felt struggling as well, and then I thought like, oh, let me just write about it, because especially like when I started content creation, well, I started basically in 2013,
Wow.
but moved like I think I got more into social media around 2018, 2017, 18, when I was also working like as a junior, and I felt I always was like the silent guy in the corner of the room. And I also never like, that's also the one thing that I always like kind of regret, that I back in the time when I started, I never made like some photos or videos about my progress or whatever. So I kind of felt like, okay, I should really like get out of my shell, try to like, as they always say, like the most silent people have the most thing to say, but they never say it. And I also had that, like I had so much to say on my mind, but I really felt like I didn't feel the courage to do it. And with social media, it's really easy, because then you are behind the screen, you don't see the people. And that's how well, especially back then with Instagram, it was just pictures. So I just shared a picture of a book that I really liked, or she shared a picture of a blog post I just wrote about a certain topping of design patterns or whatever, or just shared a picture, and it was all about the caption as well. That's also still something that I really find super important about my post. Although probably 1% reads it, but the main content of my content is the caption.
Yep.
Like the description below, because I always, even if I do like a shit post about like just a funny thing, then I always try to bring value within the caption that resonates with something funny. For example, if it's like a joke about debugging, like the famous joke about an error on line 32 and there is nothing on line 32. Like I hate it that those posts work well, but always when I do a post like that, I always like to share like 5 or 6 debugging tips that are really valuable, just in case if someone finds this post because of this debugging joke, that they can also learn something in the caption. That's always something that I at least try to do. But that's also like how my entire social media started, like having a picture of a bug, then posting about it and sharing how I would take it, and then get feedback from others, learn more about that. And that way I also was able to speak up to my coworkers and my seniors to say like, hey, I think we should take it like this way or that way. And then they also thought like, hey, that's actually quite a cool idea. And then I also started to feel like more confident in my job. And
it's this inhumane way of thinking about work or life or people as their titles. Like the thing is, we're so caught up with titles like senior or mid-level or junior. Like we think literally these people are born senior, like you either are talented and can do that, or you're just not that. And I think that is enhanced in the age of social media more than anything these days, because again, you only see the final polished work, yet it's rarely that you see a guy like you who's saying, debugging, and here are the tips that worked for me, and it's actually interacting with people, because that takes a lot of effort. It also takes a lot of vulnerability, right?
Absolutely.
And I feel like when you humanize the process, it makes it more approachable. For me, for example, as a person who really is interested in coding, I'm looking at your content, I'm also looking at your experience, and I'm saying, if Justin did it, so can Jack, right? And I'm not getting that other way of thinking where it's, oh, that is amazing, and I love what I'm seeing, but I'll never do it because I'm just not good enough, which is just inhumane way to look at things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's also why, like I said, I always try to at least inspire or whatever, to give other people also the feeling that you can do it. And I mean, also I can go back to like how I started, because when I was like younger, I didn't have any tech in my youth. Like I especially came from like I'm the youngest child, so my brothers always got like the prime time of the computer. We had one shared computer in the household, and because of that, and we
Yeah.
also had like a family that was super sports focused. So I always did gymnastics, also at like quite a high level, not super high, but also not super low. And it was really like my passion. I did it like I trained at least 3 days a week, and I also did go to the gym. And like my whole life was about gymnastics. And always when I had like at least an hour or something to play, then I would always play the game RuneScape, which is basically also still my favorite game. But it was up until 2011. Then I broke my knee with, well, it basically happened with gymnastics, but it was also a whole thing of like being in my growth spurt and training too much, also training too much outside of training. So yeah, it couldn't really be foreseen. And then I broke my knee. And then when they tried to like a bone stuck out of my knee, and when they placed the bone back, the bone had cracked in half. So it was basically immediately over with
Wow.
with me as well. Like I still have this injury for the rest of my life.
Oh, wow.
But it was in the hospital that I actually started programming, that I actually found out about it. Because, like I said, I always like, I think I played like maybe 1 or 2 hours a week RuneScape, because when my brothers didn't have time on the computer, then I was there. Except when I was like, for example, at my best friend's place, they had an extra computer and we could play RuneScape together, stuff like that. But my life was all about gymnastics. And then when I got into the hospital, I had like one of the my PC or like the laptops that you could rent there, and I was in the hospital for 3 days. And as a guy that was like fully devoted to sports, if you have to lay in the bed for 3 days straight, you get bored like super quick, because I wanted to do stuff. Like I had so much energy that needed to go out, but I couldn't. And that way I got myself into finding out how RuneScape was made. I was just playing RuneScape. I got bored after a few hours because basically never played that long.
Yeah.
And then I found like, I don't know how it happened, but I found my way into talking to someone on a forum who teach me how to set up a private server. And that's how it all started. Like then I found out like in the hospital, setting up a private server just locally, not on, later I started to learn how to host it, but first locally. And that way I could, it was just simple stuff like removing trees and making an open field. It was just stuff like that, finding out where the trees are, where they're located in the code, remove that line, and then you have an open field. And then set some codes that how you can teleport to fields. And then you learn like, oh, if you can remove trees, you can also copy code from like, let's say a crate and place that instead of the tree. And then you can really like create your own kind of area in the game. And just stuff like that really sounded magical to me. So I really got into that. I did do that for like a year, not knowing what I was doing. Like just like I found this, I'm in a wheelchair, I can't move. I have to try something.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed that because I like to play RuneScape, and now I could like kind of change it as well and host it and have I think like maximum of 10 players online that kind of enjoyed it as well. Because back in those days the private server community was quite fun, like with like a lot of small communities. And that's how it all started. And then at some point my brother told me like, hey, what you are doing, like he was in his last grade of school, high school. He's like, yeah, I have some classmates that are gonna do game development at college. I was like, game development, what is that? No, I didn't know. So then I went to a trial class of this college, just checking out, and they showed how to create a simple platformer within a day in Flash ActionScript. It was like very basic. They had all the scripts already ready, and they just showed you, oh, if you draw this, you place it there, you draw this, you place it there, and they already had the character movement script and just the character movement jumping from platform to platform.
How old were you?
And I noticed I was 17, 18, something like that.
Got it.
17.
All right. Yeah.
17, yeah. 16, 17, something like that. And then when I saw that, I was like, holy shit, this is what I've been doing with this private server. That has been my passion for at least the last year. And I was doing everything solely in Notepad as well. Like I was so non-technological, and my parents as well, my brothers, they didn't know anything. So I did everything solely in Notepad because that was the only text editor that I knew of. And I was like, whoa, this guy has this. It was with ActionScript, and everything is with colored, and everything works so well. It's like, how did I never know about this? And that really got me into like programming in general, and shifted my passion from which I had from gymnastics, which was my whole life, and slowly switched to this new passion for programming unknowingly as well. Because of course, like I was pretty depressed back then, because if you're 15 years old and you lose your passion of gymnastics, of sports, and like back then I was like, oh, I want to be a tutor of gymnastics or whatever, like that was kind of the way that I was thinking. And then because of this injury, I wasn't be able to do the test to go to that college. So what are you going to do? So I really like from my third to fourth year in high school was tough, because I was like a child that had this injury. I had to cope with that injury and had to figure out what are you going to do next, because I had no idea. I thought I had it all planned out in my head, but that was all scrap because of one injury. And then suddenly I found this, and like I said, I went to the trial class, and I still hold that feeling today that I had on that day, of the excitement of seeing how you can make something work, just a simple in ActionScript, and that it's basically endless. Like the possibilities are endless which you can create, and that is something that I still hold today, that spark in me, and I always will try to keep that alive. Because like I said, I think if someone else loses a passion and realizes they found a new one basically the day they lost the other one, but they find out later, then I think that strength of that passion is also hard or so strongly in you. Yeah, it's hard to describe. But
I would imagine it being super difficult, especially when you started as an athlete, maybe, or early athlete, and you build your identity in your teen years around that.
Exactly.
Then that's all right. And then all of a sudden, it's this huge shift in identity. Even especially in that age, it can be quite difficult to process. But I feel like you took the best out of sports, which is like if you what you put into it, you get out of it. And what I think is good in sports as well is that you should not be afraid to try things, because you're literally losing nothing. So if, let's say, in gymnastics, I bet in the beginning all of the moves didn't work out, right? But you still felt good because you got the exercise out of it, or you were improving gradually. And I feel like you've taken that and you put it into the world of scripting or the world of game development. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's also something that I am so grateful for, that I had, that I had been in this state in my teens of being, well, like I said, I was not too low, but not too high with gymnastics. And I really saw this as my future. And I broke so much in my life, like my fingers, like I broke almost all my fingers. And I learned from a young age that, you have to fall, stand up, do it better.
Yeah.
Every time when you fall, you realize what you did wrong, and you can improve next time. And even if that means you break your finger, you break, well, unfortunately, don't break your knee, unfortunately, of course. But like you can, like I had my elbow, I said, like dislocated a few times, because like when I don't know what's like, but
honestly,
it's called a flick flag.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
If you put your hands like this, then it pushes out. And I had this 2 times, but it makes you realize that you have to put your hands in, So that's the same with work as well. Like if you break production, you realize, okay, I should always test it 3-4 times before pushing something to production. Stuff like that still has the same mentality as a sportsman, especially if you become professional, to have like a sports mindset, in my opinion, to get the best out of it.
Do you think that maybe the percentage of things going wrong and maybe affecting you physically is way less with programming? Maybe that's why you have chased it with full power?
Yeah, well, yeah, of course, sort of. It was also, of course, a huge shot, because, well, you don't, like I said, like I didn't have anyone or anything to help me, to guide me, to give me some handles to help. So it was for me a bit of like a big shot to say, like, okay, I'm going to fully devote myself to this now, and this is going to be my life, while not knowing anyone that did it.
So how did it become like from hobby to maybe a second job scripting?
Yeah, that's basically because I went to college. Like first it was my hobby, because, well, I just thought, like I learned programming in the hospital, basically, and creating a RuneScape private server. And then I found out that you could get a degree in software development, especially in the Netherlands. I think it's now just called software engineering with a I say like core focus on game development. But back in my day, it was really called game development. You had game development, game art, and those two were then like divided. And they also had a sub branch of game development, or like development, which was to web development.
Yep.
We always had the first year you start with everyone. Back then it was just 150 people. And the funny thing was also there, and that's still one thing that also, like, why I like to create this content is one thing that I noticed was in the beginning, we had 150 students in first class. And when they asked the question, like, who's going to do web development, almost no one put their hand up. And if they asked who is going to do game development, everyone put their hand up. Like, I think almost everyone was there to learn about games. I took my hand up for both because I was like, I want to learn how to program. I really like to create games. I like to create this RuneScape private server, but I'm still open to anything. Like, this is all super new to me. So please also teach me how to learn a website because I want to know it all. And at the second semester, you had to make a choice, make a pivot towards web development or game development. And within this first 2 semesters, you get like a few classes. You had to, especially because we did ActionScript, you had to like make your own vector math, super basic. But just something simple as vector math got so many people off. Like suddenly we went from 150 to 30 people into game development, crazy. Like literally like that.
Wow.
And that is still quite crazy to me, that just math and just the difficulty of game development, because web development was, I still like, I adore every web developer and there's a lot of cool stuff there. But especially in the beginning, to learn, the learning curve is much faster. It's easier to understand, more tools, especially back then. There are now more tools for game development as well. But back then, Unity wasn't even the thing. Unity was a thing, but it wasn't a thing in teaching or whatever. It also still had like the old UGUI systems and stuff. So like creating games wasn't that easy as it is now back then, although it was still easier. But anyway, it's another topic. But because of that, like people tended to go for the easy route, go for web development, especially in the beginning, in the early pivot. Because I think if you are a software engineer or a senior software engineer in web development, you also have a lot of difficult challenges that I would also like have struggled with to figure out, and I would need to go into a certain path to get to that level as well. So there is nothing, I don't want to say anything that web development is much easier or whatever, but like I said, it's an easier begin path.
It doesn't get too complex too quickly, like maybe game development might get.
Exactly. So because of that, a lot of people just pivot easily to that. But like nowadays, and that's also something that I found funny on my social media, is if I talk about math, also kind of depends on which platform, especially on TikTok, they're more like, the game development doesn't need math, and other people are like, we need to embrace it. And that's also what I like to say to everyone, like just embrace it. It's there. It's not like in traditional math at all. Like I hated math in high school. I didn't understand why I would ever like to know how to how you say it, like know the size of, or how much water is in a bathtub of this by this size. I would never care. And now it's like, but now if you know that, then you can make whole game elements out of it, or you can you can put triggers based on how much is inside of a bathtub. Just a very basic example though. But there's just so much more, and it's also the direct response you get from math. I mean, you probably know this for sure as well, as being like more in the technical visualization, that if you make shaders or whatever equation you make, if it goes wrong, you immediately see it.
Exactly.
It often gets purple as well, but
I feel like with shaders you would know what kind of didn't work visually, but with code it's like you get that error. That is exactly what you said.
Well, it depends.
Debugging.
Like for example, I really like to work with physics and stuff, and I really like it when you make a mistake and stuff starts flying the wrong way, or stuff starts clipping wrong.
But those are exactly the moments where you're like, I can use that for later, and then you would save exactly what you did, and you put it on a different project because you're like, I might go there again. Just wanted to touch on the topic of maths and how they're taught in school. I think the reason why they did not resonate with most people is because it wasn't really practical and it wasn't real time. I think that is the huge problem. If it's not real time, I'm just not interested in learning what a sine curve is if you draw it on a drawing board. If it's animated, right, which you could just Google and you would get a GIF and you would know, okay, what's happening here. Or if you would have like an exercise in Unreal Engine, for example, with the students, or with Unity, where you were just teaching, okay, let's try to make, this is the sine node, for example, in VFX graph, or sorry, in shader graph. Let's figure out how what we can do with this, like knowing that other nodes exist, right? Like, can we move that texture right and left? Can we move that texture in a circle, for example? And how would we move that texture in a circle? So like the the sine and the cosine, if you put them in different values in that vector 2, they would make a circle perfectly. So I think if that was taught in that way, instead of like, oh, you have that exam in 1 month, and if you don't understand what this is, well, you're gonna get bad grades. That's just unfortunate.
Exactly. And, well, I think just in general, like making stuff playful just helps so much more.
Yeah.
Like I would like to teach everyone math by making a game, but I also know that it will not work for everyone as well. It worked for me, but I mean, there's also still a large group of people that does get a lot of like from traditional math. So that's also always the thing that's super hard to like find the way that fits all, or find a way to make it fit for all. That's also why I really liked my education back when I started game development, because within my education, we really noticed that you had a lot of creative freedom. Like you would just get taught basic programming fundamentals, but after that it was fully like you were basically self-taught within a schedule. Like being like, I don't want to say like, oh, like self-taught is the same as having a degree. Definitely not, because self-taught has much more difficulty to it, because you still have your ongoing life and stuff, and with going to college you have this devotion to being there from this time, and you have this time slots and you get to work with people. But in the end you have to do it yourself, because also if I looked at my class back then, you had a group of people who wanted to go AAA, you had a group of people who wanted to go mobile, you had a group of people like me who didn't know, like they were open for everything, and then you had a group of people who really wanted to create serious games or whatever. Like, how are you gonna teach someone that wants to make, for example, basic educational games for children, or someone that wants to create AAA games and want to work at Guerrilla, for example, in like there's such a huge difference between them. But you could still have, if everyone has their creative freedom, then people can find their focus, and then you just need to have the right teachers who are more like tutors to help you get the focus on what you need to focus on. You know, that just helps a lot. And that's also why I always like to say, like, focus on fundamentals as much as possible, because from the fundamentals you can decide which path you want to choose. And there is no wrong path. If you want to go serious games at first and then go to AAA, or the other way around, which happens more often, that people try for the AAA route and then they realize, oh, it's too hard, or there is not enough work in that space, and there's more work in mobile game development, serious games and stuff, that they try to pivot. But your knowledge is not lost, you know. You can still use, if you know the right fundamentals, especially within programming, like how to structure your code, how to set it up, how to, like I said, work with math, how to implement stuff. Like, you can basically do anything and try to focus on something.
I think the thing that is super hard to understand about this whole concepts is that they sound like concepts. You know, when you say structure your code, I can't imagine what that would be, right? And I feel that is due to the fact that the entry is unknown. There's no one go-to thing that you have to do where you learn the basics from, right? There's around 20,000 video tutorials, and it's whatever, like it's everywhere, yet it's nowhere. Like, you don't have a clear starting point, and I think that does the whole thing disservice. Also, the amount of languages that there are, like the amount of things that you have to overcome. So I guess the question, if to you right now, like if you would give a beginner a 20-minute tangible task, right, what would you tell them to do?
Like a tangible task?
Yeah.
As in like from the very beginning? Yeah. I just was thinking about it. Like, one thing that I found and this is my personal opinion though, like some people like to disagree on this, but I think within the current state of the industry, we are too spoiled. Like I said, especially with like Unreal, Unity, there's so many tools for you. You can create so much stuff. The results are instant. Like, stuff that usually took a week or 2 weeks to build, you can create it in an hour now. It's like, and that's more what I mean. Like, if you have to like make your own render system and stuff, like nowadays you just like press, like you open Unity, you right press, put a cube down, and you know, you can add the script to it and you can make it move. It's like super quick. But I find that's also the problem nowadays, that it's too quick for us to realize how much work it is to make something ambitious. If you want to, like, in the end, like, that's also, if I can quickly go back to the math topic. So some people that like to argue that game development doesn't require that much math. That's true to a certain extent, because you can work with tools, but those will limit you. But if you want to go in a full ambitious new idea that's like not being tried out yet, then you probably have to create something on your own. And because of that, I think it's super important to have fundamentals. And that's why I always say, like, please start learning to program in plain programming languages. You can use JavaScript.
Before we dive into the next part of our conversation, I would like to take a quick moment to speak directly to you, the listener. This podcast exists to be accessible and free for everyone. Producing it takes time. If this conversation had ever provided you with a value or made you maybe feel less alone on your own creative path, please consider supporting its future. There are 2 ways to do that, and both would mean the world to me. Let's start with the first one. You can make a one-time donation on my PayPal, or one that happens every month. This goes directly into keeping the mics and the conversation flowing. The second option is through affiliations with online education platforms. So if any of the conversation has sparked you to actually pursue a certain skill, but you didn't know how to, I created a list that goes through the interests that I cover, such as Houdini, visual effects for films, visual effects for games, 3D modeling, Blender, animations, and so on. When you click on that list and you find the course that resonates with you, not only you get a special discount, but you're also directly supporting this podcast. So in a way to give back to you, you will learn something new, you'll get it for a discount, and you will help this channel grow and the mics flowing. Whichever path you choose to support this channel, every bit of support makes a tangible difference and is deeply appreciated. The links for both are on your screen right now and also in the description. Thank you so much for even considering it. Now, let's go back to the conversation.
That's also fine.
Help me understand
C
that better. If someone watching this and having no idea what a plain language is, right? Like help us understand this a little bit. Like, let's say unpack that a little bit.
A plain language, what I mean is like just without an editor. Like you just don't go into Unity, place a cube and make it move. But instead you just go into Visual Studio or whatever IDE you like to use and make it open a window, make it draw a shape and make that shape move. It's much more work to make that work.
Yeah.
But more understanding what type of process is to make that work is such a huge benefit in the long run. Once you started to like eventually, of course, go to Unity, create fun stuff and try to hack things together as quickly as possible. But if you know how fundamentals work, then in the long run, you can always like make it work. Because even though if there are tools, but you're unaware of it, you are not like looking for hours to find the right tool to make something work. But you can then think like, oh, I have this idea in mind. I think I know how to do it. I will just try to wing it. Like that's kind of the mentality you have to kind of force yourself.
Yeah.
It's a bit of like and that's why I say like some people like to disagree on this because they say like, yeah, don't reinvent the wheel. But I always like to say if you reinvent the wheel yourself, you know how the wheel works and then you can make the best bike. It's maybe super cliche. Like you can just take a wheel of something else and create your own bike design. But if you really understand how it works and what goes into it and why a wheel works, like it's super stupid example because
it's really not a stupid example. I think I totally agree with you. It's like it's about learning how the wheel actually works. So if it breaks, you know how to fix it.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So if you're getting issues with your shader or with your game, knowing those basics, you would kind of know where the problem is, right? What you're trying to ask the engine, maybe that it's not even in it. On the contrary, right, it's someone who just learned on the surface without learning the fundamentals might struggle 3 to 4 times as much as you might struggle. Of course, the beginning is boring, in my opinion. Like let's be honest, right? It's on the total contradictory of how you started. You started with something really fun, right? Like you were modding. Yet your advice now is something where it might not be as flashy or as fun, right? You were literally modding a game you were playing, but imagine if I went to the hospital, right, at that day and was like, hey, you want to learn JavaScript? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's probably not going to motivate
JavaScript
you.
is the wrong example. C++ would have been better. But yeah.
I wonder if a lot of people are put off by like I'm not criticizing your advice. I think it's that advice comes from maybe an area of pain, right, that you had to go through. Not have, maybe you did not think that you learned the fundamentals as much as you should have. Maybe you tackled the task. Maybe you took something more that you could chew at one point.
No, not really. Actually, it's more about like what I see go wrong nowadays, especially with like how I
Yeah.
see the new generation form. Like, and we need to embrace the new generation, especially with this age of AI and stuff.
Yeah.
But I just realized I've worked with juniors in the past, and when they couldn't make it work in Unity within the tools that were there, then they wouldn't make it work in another way. And I still came from a time when Unity didn't have everything for you. It was just more like a cool tool with a physics and a render engine. But if you had to make something cool work, you had to do it yourself. Like there wasn't that much on the asset store back then, and so you just had to figure it out. And nowadays there is so much there that if you can find a tool to make it work for you, people tend to stop trying to figure it out. And I want to kind of direct it back to have people figuring stuff out first, or understand how to figure stuff out. Because like I said, when I was modding this RuneScape private server, I also had to figure it out. Like in the beginning, I didn't even know that there were IDEs I could use. I literally used Notepad, and I was backing everything up every 30 minutes, because if I made one mistake, then my compiler would give 999,000 lines of issues, which would never point out where the issue was. So I always had to roll back or try to remember where it was, because, well, nowadays it's also better on Notepad, but back then you only had one Control Z. So if it was wrong, you couldn't go back, you know? So,
Wow.
but that pain, and I also really enjoyed that back then, because it forced you like to think a bit more creative, and try. Like I had so many backups
Wow.
to make it work, and always go back. And if it didn't work, then I had to do it again, and that really made me learn it better, because then I could try to figure out what I did wrong or whatever.
Again, it's such a hard thing these days to know
But
exactly like where to start and to avoid like maybe learning bad habits. In my opinion, it's unavoidable these days, like with the resources that we have.
Yeah.
I don't think you could avoid
And it's also
it.
overwhelming. I mean, like I said, I did everything in Notepad because no one told me to use something else. And I found my way in it. But nowadays you have so many ways of doing. And I think like using a IDE is much more common now. Like people understand it, even that might don't know about programming, know like how code looks. Like I didn't know how code looks. For me, it was like this. It felt like a Word document that somehow was able to run. And there were like no colors to me. Like in the end, it was more. And now when programming is more embraced within society as well, like back in the day, people were also not like, oh, you're gonna make games, and people didn't really understand it. Like I said, when I started learning to program like 15 years ago, 14 years ago, people didn't really understand it. What the future was going to be for that. But nowadays, especially after also the COVID craze and stuff, I think everyone knows about programming. Even the elder people know about it in one shape or form. Like, of course, they don't understand it, but they do know that there is a future in it, which was different back in the day. But because of that, there are now so many people who try or want to tell you how to do it right, that it's hard to find out what works best for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it on its head. Like there's also what works for you versus where you're getting the advice from and who's giving the advice. And like it's hard to teach to be skeptical first, right? Because you will have those you will have those people that maybe will take advantage of you. Like, free work. All right, let's teach them stuff that maybe they will never need, but that they will be helpful for me and my company, right? Instead of like teaching the proper stuff. And it's hard as a young person to not fall in that trap, especially if you're super passionate about game development. Then you just get used in a way. But like, how do we teach people like wake up or be careful? Like,
no, but it's the same with courses these days. I mean, like the courses work best to have like that you can create something quick. It's like people want to create, like if something doesn't work out within a day, then people don't like it anymore. Well, I liked back in the day when I followed tutorials. For example, I really like. I even went back to it lately when I was working on a project of my own from Thin Matrix. We had like an OpenGL series of like making an OpenGL multiplayer game. And it's a very long series. Like you can follow this for weeks, months, even.
Wow.
And I really like back in the day when I followed this. I was in college when I followed this, and for me, I followed these tutorials when I had my internships. And I had my internship here in The Hague, and I lived up in the north of the Netherlands. And I always had to commute 3 hours to go there and 3 hours back. So I utilized those 6 hours of commute to. I always downloaded his videos and followed it along, and then tried to make it something of myself.
Wow.
A big example of that is that he did these tutorials in Java, and I try to use this knowledge, because I also know Java, but use this knowledge and create something with it in C++ to
Wow.
do what he does, but then in C++. And that was then like a really fun like exercise to do for me in the train, commuting 6 hours a day. To just like have these videos downloaded, see what he creates, see how he works it out in Java, and then try to translate it for myself and create something in C++, because I was really interested in C++.
Yeah.
I still am, but I never really had like professional experience with it. But I always like to play with C++ in my spare time.
Okay, I have so many questions. Okay, so like what makes C++ so interesting for you? Although the aura around it, right? There's a difference between the truth and what people say.
Yeah.
The aura around C++, it's the hardest thing to learn. So what clicks for you?
Yeah, well, I think it's more like having all the control, like having the memory control, having the control of your program. That's what I really love about C++. It also makes it indeed like super difficult and makes it harder to learn. But I would like to say to everyone who wants to learn C++, please watch the journal on YouTube. He will help you find confidence in understanding how C++ works. And that's really like just having the power of understanding how a program runs, how memory is allocated, where it's allocated, how it works, when it needs to be freed, etc. Although it's super, I said like overwhelming and maybe overcomplicated in some form, it is just so nice to have like at least to find this mental trick of like how it works, where it is, where like literally where your variable is, where it is in the program, where it works, and then you can question yourself if it's still right at this point of time in the program. So if you need to free it or if you need to move it, whatever, reuse it, like make stuff work better. And just having that power is just like I really like that about it.
The way I try to explain C++ to people who maybe don't know C++ and the difference between C++ and other stuff is like buying a car from the 70s or from the 60s, where you have all the controls to modify, or each steering you're doing is actual physical mechanical steering. And the difference between that and like a car from like these days where everything runs over a computer and you have the infotainment and everything. So I feel like C++ is a bit like the mother of the other languages, if you may. Or how would you describe it?
Yeah, it's low. Well, I would explain it as like living off grid or living on grid.
Oh, that's exactly like with the car, right?
Yeah, like if you live off grid, you have to like utilize your resources. You have to fix your roof if it's leaking. Like you don't have people that can help you with that. And if you live on grid, like maybe someone built the house for you. Like there are like amenities there that are being maintained and are working,
or maybe are not as optimized as there should be.
Exactly.
But also like C# is built upon.
Your microphone.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. So C# is basically built upon C++, correct?
Yeah, but there's actually a fun story about C#. I don't know if it's completely true. At least I heard this. It's like C# is basically a version of Java, and Java was created as a well, I don't know if I can say, but FU against C++, because Groslin was like, yeah, this whole memory stuff, like it can be simplified. And I think he also had other things that he was against C++. So he wanted to create something in opposite to it, and there came Java. I remember it had like many other names before it came to Java. And then Microsoft came to it and said like, oh, this is indeed cool. And then they created this version of Java, which became C#. If I understood it correctly. I'm not, don't fact check, or please fact check me on this, but I don't have.
It's a podcast. No one does a fact check.
Exactly. But it's something like that. So it's actually funny. Like some people like to say like, oh, C# is like C+++++, and then like 4 pluses stacked on top of each other. But I actually like it to see it like if you, it's basically C, like C++, and then if you have a FU, usually it's like described as also a hashtag and then some other like arbitrary things, characters. So I like to see it as that, like as a C, fuck you. But that's more like how it works, because it's so opposite of it. And like, you have so many stuff that's managed for you that you don't have to really focus on.
Now,
But still, like, don't be naive. I always like to say like C# can also have its memory issues. Like I like people to encourage people to learn C++ or C to understand how memory management works, to also be able to fix their memory leaks, because well, in the end it gets decompiled to C++ as well. So.
Would you say like people can break their computers if they did the wrong thing, or is that something that is just stupid to say?
No, I don't think breaking your computer is a good thing, but no.
But would that actually happen if you did something wrong with C++ that you're not supposed to do?
Well, I don't think so. No,
Yeah.
It's not really a problem. I mean, operating systems are so well in catching these operations that it can really free it when it needs to. But yeah, I mean, like if you, especially like in production, but that's like I said, I never worked professionally with C++. That's something that I don't know. But within production, of course, like a simple mistake can cause into a memory leak or whatever, like much easier, and causes your product to fail. So yeah, you have to be more cautious with that. I think that's even why the United States tried to ban it, right? Like
really?
saying like the United States tried to ban C++ because it has too many. I say like it had too much manual work, too prone for error, that they were like, yeah, we don't want this to people to use C++ anymore.
Interesting. Oh, I didn't know that. Maybe
it's
that's
still like they're. I don't know the whole story of it, but I at least know that they had this comment about like.
Oh, now I want to learn it actually. Now that it's banned. I wanted to ask you about like dynamic coding versus static coding. Is that a thing?
As in what content?
Well, I've heard from a friend of mine that, you know, learning Java, for example, or like starting with Java not Java, sorry, Python. Starting with Python coding could limit you on your path, but I'm not sure if that's true.
Yeah, well, it's more like in the case of like learning Python coming from C++. It's much easier than learning C++ coming from Python. And this is basically exactly the same as coming down to exactly the same as I said earlier, just because you get spoiled. You get so much stuff that works for you. And like, you know, you can do something in one line in Python and it requires maybe 30, 40 lines in C++. And if you see that, you're like, why would I write 40 lines if it can be done in one, you know?
Gotcha.
Well, the other way around, if you come from C++, you understand why those 40 lines work. Then you're like, oh, it's cool. It also works in one line, but you still understand how it works in 40 lines.
I get it. All right. So it's like, again, fundamentals versus... Yeah. Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, that's a lot about coding. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, it also depends on how you take it, right? Like it's all about mentality in that regard as well. If you, like I said, like if you feel like, oh yeah, this can be done in one line, why should I do in 40? That also, it's also a bit about yourself. You could also think like, oh, this is one line here and 40 lines there, and then it could also be a trigger to think like, but why does it need 40 lines in one language and one line in the other? You know, I think a curiosity is playing a big factor as well, which I think is super important.
Yeah, it's also the end of the mean, right? Like some people just use coding and they use creative coding just to, you know, get their game out. As long as it works, right? As long as it does 60 FPS, fine, whatever. So I guess like what you do is what is it called? System programming, correct?
Yeah, well, now I'm working in live ops. So I'm mainly like maintaining live games at Lessmore, which is a lot of fun. But one of my like personal specifications or like focus is systems and tools. Like I've been doing live ops for quite a while now, and I always realized that at some point in some shape, when I get like an opportunity to create a tool to make something work, or like make something more efficient within the team or stuff, like then I always tend to pick that up quickly or try to create it myself while I'm creating something. So it always like doesn't matter what kind of focus I get in work, it always ends up doing some kind of systems or tools.
So when you say systems, for someone who again has no idea about coding, how would you explain it in a fun way, like what you do? Summary.
Yeah, for me, systems are mainly like, for example, an inventory has a system that has to understand how many items are in your inventory and how it works, and which can be stacked and which cannot be stacked, or like it has a lot of deep fundamentals to it. Like,
a lot of definitions as well.
Exactly. And then for me, it's also like creating that system in a way that it has different layers. So you could use, like, I always like to say that you have a core layer, then you have a base layer, and then you have your game layer.
Okay.
And
all right.
The core layer could always be extracted and be reused in any other shape or form. So for other games that might use an inventory system. Like, it could be horizontal, vertical, whatever. It could be stackable. Like, doesn't matter how, like, inventories, just as this example, can vary in many shapes or forms. So the core needs to be able to apply to those alts. And then you have your base, which has some kind of layers that might maybe a bit more specific, but still comply with like being as broad as possible.
What
But
would
gives
be
you
an
a bit
example
more.
for like a core layer in an inventory system?
Yeah, it's more like an inventory or an interface where you just ask what it can do, like add an item, remove an item.
Got it. And the base
and
layer?
it would just return. And the base layer would have logic to that, saying
Got
like
it.
this, when this happens, it does this and that. And then when the game layer is there, it actually has like the visual implementation of that and can add to not to the core, but can add to the base layer some additional implementations that are specific for the game itself. So it can have certain wrappers, or it can have like a condition when something cannot be placed or can be placed, or
then an effect happens or a sound will play, and that would be like functional.
But for example, in the core,
Yeah.
in the core, you would also have like some cheat detection. So if something gets added 2 times in one time, then you can add like a detection that's not be possible. If it is like depends on the case, of course, but you could add like some kind of like detection systems on there as well to make sure it works how you want it to work. And then in the base, you literally like make it, form it, etc. And then your game layer has like the final implementation and visualization of it.
It's so interesting that even in code you work like from micro to macro, right?
Yeah.
You establish the the most simple and the core details first, and then you zoom in and you kind of like put in the layers, as you said, like the details, and then the even more functional detail to make the game juicy or whatever, or make it a game.
Exactly.
Interesting that this is also kind of like similar to coding as well. Because with drawing, you would do the same thing, right? You would sketch the general shape. Yeah.
But that's also why I say like coding is an art form as well.
Yeah.
Like it's more a creative, or like a mental type of art.
Logic.
Like, no one can see it. It's logic indeed, but it needs to be creative enough to work in different scenarios.
Yeah.
But also still be like fully optimal for its use.
But what do you do so you keep like your like your brain muscles always warmed up? Because I would imagine if you kind of like sports, right? If you don't stretch, if you don't train, have like muscles that are constantly doing the same movement that you do in the sports, you would probably not perform as good. So how do you keep your brain working, but also not working? You know what I mean? Like, how do you train it?
I think it's important to keep creating stuff, but also to keep experimenting with different stuff.
All right.
In my case, for example, like you at work, I create stuff. I create for work, but then in my spare time, I also like to create stuff. But I don't want to sound that everyone has to like work and then also work on their own stuff.
I get it.
At the end, but in some shape or form, try to trigger yourself to find other ways as well. That's why for example, I work with C# at work, and then I work with C++ in my spare time, and that way I still have like it's still similar in some shape or form, but it's also totally different. Like I have to do a whole different way of thinking.
Yeah,
and that way I can keep myself sharp and try different things, and keep stuff interesting as well. But I also don't want it to sound like that
you have
I
to
also
work
don't
24/7.
encourage people that you have to do two jobs.
Yeah.
Like I also know great programmers that work 9 to 5 and then they log off and they do something totally different. Like they go bouldering, or they go out, or they go play games, or they do stuff totally different from my own.
Whatever works for you, like in the end, if it's something that is making you relax instead of it making it feel like you're working, I guess it works for you then. So what do you do like as a small project? Are you pursuing maybe like technical art projects or games or web? What are you doing?
No, at this moment, and don't hold me accountable for it, but I think for like 2 years now, I want to make it's basically a course where I want to create a game. It's a basic pool game, but it's entirely from scratch.
Cool.
So it's just C++. It has SFML for rendering, and it has what was it? I am GUI for just some tooling around it. But the base is like everything is done from scratch. And I wanted just to be created to teach people, like I said, to not be creating stuff within another engine and just try to learn stuff, how it works on your own. And I also want this to be approachable for everyone, from totally beginners to people who are maybe in the industry for a while.
That's tough
just
one.
to give them, but just to give people an idea of like, oh yeah, let's create something from scratch again, just to understand it again. Because I also realized when creating this, although I created it 2 years ago now, and I realized that I also had to struggle with creating some stuff.
But I'm sorry to interrupt,
in
but
this case,
like I feel like
no,
that's
sure.
the best thing to show in a course. The instructor
Exactly.
actually struggling with you. Go ahead. Sorry.
Exactly. But it's also like what I want to do is it's a pool game, and like don't hold me accountable because I'm telling this for 2 years now that I want to create this, and I've been close to finishing a few times, but then I got laid off, or some issues were in the industry that caused me to pivot focus, and every time when I have to pivot back, then I get another priority, and then when I get back to it, like I have to really redo it again to get into the right state again. But the main goal is whenever you make something within physics, I also want to make an experiment just to visualize the physics. So an example is if you have a ball and you want to bounce it to the right, and then just calculate what happens and just draw a line what happens when it touches it, where it goes next.
Yeah.
So you just have a line visualization of discrete versus continuous. And with continuous, you can really like calculate where it is, where the point is we hit, what the leftover part is, reflected, and then you use the same calculation on that reflection, and that way you can really visualize how it works. This was something that was so super beneficial for me when I was studying game development, because when I was like creating stuff and just experimenting with simple stuff, and visualizing, for example, the velocities and stuff, what it was doing, and then I could see how it worked, and also see how it worked when it went wrong, and that was helped me so much understanding how it works and etc.
Yeah.
So that is stuff that I've been working on and off now for 2 years, unfortunately. In the meanwhile, I also like sometimes had to switch priorities. Then for example, when I got laid off, then you have to work on
getting a job,
test projects. I also create like a demo project and worked on a game jam a few months ago as well, which was a long time ago that I joined another one. But those are definitely stuff I like to create. But I also like to, like when there is something with work, well, for example, with when I first got into a project that uses dependency injection. There's a system which has a different way of constructing your code, and I didn't really understand how it worked. So then I tried to create my own dependency injection system, just very basic, but just try to understand how it works and how this more complex tool has its values, and I have to understand it. And same for for example, entity component system, like how that works and how it's structured, just in the basic shapes. Like, of course, don't try to recreate something that the tool that has been in development for years. But if you're going to use it, I want to really understand it. So those are usually the type of projects that I take in my spare time, that I also never share, because they are more for me to learn.
Yeah.
And that's why I also want to really create this course to help people understand how you can experiment with stuff to understand it.
I really like that it's combining a lot of non-spoiled workflows, if you may, if that makes sense, that are like hidden knowledge or ancient knowledge, if you may, as well, that might not be as flashy as learning Unreal Engine, because it already puts everything for you on a silver platter. And I feel there's just not as good mentality these days to approach things. Like one example is like technical art, right? You've seen like the subreddit, for example, on Reddit growing maybe 15 times as much as it was like 2 years or 3 years ago. And it's literally the same question all over, like the same question, which is like how to become a technical artist. And that question for me can be answered with how to become a technical artist. Work in the 2000s, fail and fail and fail again, and work as a generalist over and over again, and switch departments maybe 60 times, and then you become a technical artist. You know, it's like, well, you can become a technical artist if you were focused on game development, and then you found out that you actually like to do creative coding, for example, or to solve visual problems in coding and stuff like that. What's your answer, I guess?
Yeah, for me, it's always about curiosity.
Yeah.
Like the thing that most people, what goes wrong, and there's nothing wrong with it, first of all, is they see like game development, or they play games and they think like, oh, I also want to make games. There's nothing wrong with it, but there is something wrong with that mentality to think making games is like playing games. It's more about having the curiosity how a game works, what's behind it, what makes it run, and be very intrigued by how that works. And if you're not really intrigued, but more on like, I want to play games, so I want to make games. And again, like I know people that have that mentality and are still great game developers, but in the end, every game developer programmer that I know has this like internal interest of how it works in the backend instead of how the results are.
Yep.
Like they always have this huge passion of programming and management of like making stuff more optimized and structured, etc. Like they always have a huge passion for that instead of making games itself. And I also know like a lot of great game designers that I know that also wanted to make games, and then they realized that they were more into playing games than actually creating it, and they felt like, oh, but you also have a game design. And I don't want to say every game designer is like a gamer that wanted to be a game developer and then became a game designer.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with having a huge passion for games and then want to create them. But that can also be a great sign for being a great game designer, because you may have a lot of cool creative ideas that you're not really logically interested in, but you still have this really cool interest in making it work and working together with people to make it work. Because I am really bad in game design, because I'm more about game programming. And I just really love making games because of the instant result you get creating something. So yeah, it's really hard if someone wants to say like, oh yeah, how can I become a game developer? Now it's more like it also kind of starts with yourself. Like, what is your internal interest? And it may that you don't know it yet. That's also fine. You at least have an interest in games, so try to figure out what your path is. Like I also know game artists that became great programmers.
Absolutely, but
game
Justin,
programmers
like,
that became game artists.
I feel like the industry puts you in a box so early on. Like also even in mentorship, right? Like if you wanna learn 3D environment art, you're probably hiring a mentor that does that and is specialized in that, or 3D characters. But maybe you're interested in one aspect of that. The problem is you start showing a little bit of interest, then that mentor, tries to tell you focus. No, you can't do that. That's the job of the developer. You can't do that. You're responsible of your cubic, so to speak, and you don't get out of that cube. It's not allowed. Just focus on your work, get a job, make a portfolio, stuff like that. What can you say to beginners who are being put in a box and that might be limiting their potential?
Well, I always think you have to think outside of the box, and I also always think that you have to be open for everyone. And if any tutor says you differently, I think you just have the wrong tutor, in my opinion. But that's in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because it's also, like I said, like sometimes people, and there's nothing wrong with it. Like if you want to pursue, for example, AAA from the beginning, that's totally fine. But it may not be as you think it will be, And it's just important to stay open. Like, also, if I look at my own career, of course, when I started, I thought, like, oh, it would be so cool to create like a grand title that everyone knows and everyone has played.
Yeah.
I mean, that's of course a cool achievement to have on your name.
Yeah.
But in the end, there are so many other ways of making games that give you a similar as a level of satisfaction. And there are also great indie games that have huge successes and stuff. And there is nothing like it's really up to you on like trying to figure out what works best for you. I also know a lot of people that went AAA, and after 5 years, they like felt fully burned out by it and went for an indie studio because they felt like, oh, I want to express more of my creativity. Because, well, within AAA, you're of course like just a very small piece of the puzzle, and within indie or maybe, for example, in mobile game development, you are like a bigger piece. Like you have more ownerships, more responsibilities. So just try to figure out what works best for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree with you. It is a huge. I think it's good to tell beginners in the beginning that they have to figure things out and that there's no one answer. And I feel like teaching things, as you said, as fundamentals and not as surface skills, which are filled these days. Everything is surface. Everything is superficial. Courses are superficial. Like how to make this genre game from zero to hero, like in 2 days, in 2 weeks, do this and that. And it's like, yeah, you will learn some fundamentals, but you're just too focused on the surface and the results on the cover of that, and not actually the core. And you also get roles that are attached to that sometimes. Like, for example, when you first learned coding can be applied to so many different factors, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's maybe less so for artists. I think the best skill I can tell artists to go and pursue is drawing, because drawing can be applied to anything. It can be applied to animation, can be applied for illustrations, could be applied to graphic design, even to VFX, even to technical art. Like, it could be scaled up as much as you want. But I feel like coding is I'm not gonna say like you find job easier, but there's so many applicable ways to do it, and you might get paid for it as well, as maybe not the case is right now with illustration because of AI.
Absolutely.
Any thoughts on AI?
Yeah, I love it and I hate it.
Okay.
It's basically both.
Yeah.
Like I hate it in the sense of that people don't really understand how to use it yet, and especially in management roles, and you see like people getting laid off because of it, and I think like that's just a waste, because they probably just don't understand why and how it needs to be utilized. But I also love it because it also speeds up my progress so much. It's also a thing of like I with Unity, I always like to give that as an example. Back in the day, everyone created their own render engine, their own render system to make stuff work. And nowadays you can just use a tool and make it work quickly. It is so beneficial to us. But also, like I said, as Unity has developed towards this tool where you can create so much, it also spoils us a bit too much that we want to create stuff. And then when something doesn't work, you might get into a point that you're like, oh, but how to solve this now?
Helpless, yeah.
And then you need the knowledge suddenly.
Yeah.
And that is something that people from higher ups don't always understand or don't want to understand, because they always look at the quick gains and not into the longer picture of it. And I think AI is just such a complex factor in that.
Yeah.
That, people, like some people are like, it's also other people tell that to them. They say like, oh yeah, you can easily replace this or that because of that. Also, I think in some shapes or forms, and well, people are maybe going to hate it if I say it, but if your task can be automated by AI, it probably better be, because, and then I don't want to say about, for example, art and stuff, but more about like especially in coding, some stuff is so tedious to do. Like, for example, creating builds for your games or whatever. Like, if you can just automate it with AI to have it run, have it uploaded, etc., like it saves you so much time. Or having kind of research that if you want to see if your game quickly has some flaws or whatever, like it's so nice to have a tool that can quickly scan those stuff for you. But so if that can be automated, I think it better should be. And some jobs are then affected, but I also think it could open other ways, because it also adds more possibility of creativity that you could do other stuff with it.
Yeah.
But within art, I find it really, really difficult, because I just hate generative AI. You can often, well, nowadays you can still often see it when it's generated, and I think it's just it removes some form of emotion, especially within games. But I also like it. Like, I had we had this discussion once at the studio where, of course, an artist was really against AI, but then a producer said like, yeah, but I can ask you now to make different color schemes of this concept in green, red, purple, or I can just create take your art, put it in AI, and have it run this different schemes for me. And then we have a result to check within minutes, And that's also a very scary part. And I understand that you don't want to feed your creation into AI, that it can create more stuff with it. But in the same way, it also saves you 6 hours of creating the same art within different color schemes, just as a basic. And in that, it has like a very gray area in that side of like, when is it useful and when is it not? I really want like have the creative mind still being put into it. But when you get to like final details or, like brainstorming stuff, it can be very beneficial to get results quickly and allows an artist in that case to have more time on creating real fun stuff that is more within the vision of the direction the game wants to go into, because you can rule stuff out quickly. But I found it really, really difficult in that.
I think in its core, it's simple. The idea of like, all right, I myself find task A tedious, therefore I'm gonna use AI to make task C now easier for me, because that part of the task, the subtask was super hard to do for me. So therefore I'm gonna do it with AI. For you as a person, I feel like, all right, fair game. It's everybody has it, especially if you're doing it locally. You're not hurting anybody. You're not stealing anything. It's not stealing anything from you. All right, it is what it is. The moment you put other people into the picture, it gets really complex really fast. Because especially if you have someone on the team that was responsible for that task, saying that, oh, I can cut time, meaning we don't need you, we're not gonna feed you or your family, that could get really complex. Why? Well, because we can cut time, and here where it rubs a lot of people the wrong way, of course, and I totally understand. It's like, what is what anymore, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's also what I like to say. It's also like it's such a sensitive topic,
Of course.
But I just think like, and also one thing I really hate about AI is that everything is called AI now, even if it's just an automation. Like,
yeah,
it's like we never called this AI. We use this for 20 plus years now, and now it's suddenly called AI. It's like, yeah. But anyway, so I don't know. It's just I just hate it how it's marketed, how it's used, how it's abused. Yeah. But it also has great perks into it. Like a big example for me within code is like I can quickly ask it to template something for me, and then I can just copy paste it, and I understand how it works, and then I know where to look and where to change and where to make my adjustments to it. Yeah. But it helps me like not having to set it all up, and that's with IDEs now like so easy that you can just quickly ask it to construct a class in a certain way and have it with certain parameters and variables already set up, and then I create the logic inside of it. Helps me not having to set up the whole tedious part of setting up the class. Yeah, although I get it. It's very minimal.
But I think like you, out of a lot of people, kind of can do that for your own growth. Of course, you could do that even easier because you already have the basics, you already have the fundamentals, and even if something is going wrong with the code, you're kind of able to debug it, right? You could easily say, okay, it hallucinated there, right? Yeah. Or for writers, for example, writers kind of know how to write things, and when the AI is like making just a really bad sentence, they will immediately be able to notice it than non-writers, for example, such as me.
Exactly.
And with generative AI, like art-wise, like 2D stuff or 3D stuff, it's always the people that mastered it that can notice, okay, this mesh is unusable. It's not usable, right? Or this picture is just, it has no feeling, or the composition is all wrong, or it's obviously based on a noise. It's always the people who are who spend their life already learning the craft that can notice those things. And I feel one ethical way to think about AI safety to job security is that if a company decided or is already or will decide to use it, then they must have someone with the art of or with the section they're using it from, right, to at least debug and put a human touch in. I don't know. That's just one idea, I guess.
No, 100%. Like the only way that I like to utilize generative AI, especially within art, is just two things. And that's one is for placeholding, and two is for app icons. Because app icons are always such a big deal, and you have to create so many of them, and they are never in anyone's benefit. I mean, I don't know, maybe there are some people who like to create app icons or thumbnails for whatever, but I think no one really would really like it because it's such a small thing, such a small element of like you want to maybe put more into it. And I know, for example, in mobile games, having app icons, you have to A/B test so many different app icons with different colors, different stuff. Blah, blah. Yeah. So I've seen like generative AI being utilized very good in that sense, because I always had this when I worked with an artist, and then they got this they got disrupted by the product owner or producer. They said like, yeah, we need to have a new app icon, and they're like, oh, but I actually wanted to create this new character for this, blah, blah. And then it's like, yeah, but I now have to create this app icon. You know, it's always like
I see what you mean. Yeah,
just basic stuff like that. I think like it's really nice to have a tool that can help us save time and just have have a producer literally be able to create 10 different app icons and just test it. And what I then really would like is if you know an app icon that works well, then you ask the artist, we have this app icon, it works well. Can you add your flavor to it? Like we do it
I
in
really
yours.
like the idea of earning AI access and not just giving it to everybody, like, and splitting AI access into sections. So for example, only
Yeah, but that's also a problem already, eh?
wait. So like only if you're an
So-
artist you get generative AI to use, and it's up to you to use it. You get a certain certificate that you have reached a level of fundamentals. Now you're allowed to make your job easier, and no one is allowed to say they're making your job easier other than you saying it, right? So you have the right to your own job. Writers can use it because they have the priority to use it because they're writer. See, like, you know what I mean? Like if we manage AI like that, but it's already out of the bottle. Like it's already the genie is already out. I don't think you could split it or legalize or illegalize it. I don't know. That's I'm just trying to think.
the only problem you have nowadays is that when you have apparently some AI models that have tokens, and people get into this stage of when the token out of tokens, they are out of work.
That's a good one.
It feels so weird to me. It's like, because you cannot ask AI, you are done. Like you don't know how to pursue.
Pretty much it,
that's
right?
the biggest problem, in my opinion. I think that you should be able to create it, and just it's
a radical idea.
Yeah, but it's still such a weird topic also to be like. I'm happy that I don't need it. I'm also happy when I can utilize it. Like I'm super sad. Like I saw a post lately about Stack Overflow, which is for programming. Like was always the main hub to ask your programming questions and get all your resources, get all your information from. And now, like if you see the charts, you see like after like 2020, you see like fully going down. Like no one asks questions there anymore. And I also had this with a colleague lately. He made a comment. He said like, yeah, I only used Stack Overflow once. I asked a question within 1 hour. It got blocked and banned as a unnecessary question. And but it's also like. But that's also part of the journey to me, like being able to ask stupid questions and have people like. I don't want to say like that Stack Overflow was a great place. There were definitely toxic people there, and made it sometimes harder to ask questions. But it's also good sometimes to ask questions that people say like, this is just
like don't waste time.
Why don't you? Why don't you know this? Or they just share like, just go to this post and
that's done. Yeah.
Learn from it. I think it's for a large group of people, not for everyone, but for a large group of people, it's good to understand that that sometimes you have to double think about asking a question, or maybe do your research a little bit better before trying to ask basically to annoy other people with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the part that annoys me most is when I hear stories of like people who reach their seniority of the section or that they're working in that are afraid to ask questions because then their seniority will be questioned, and I'm like, what are you talking about? The only fact that you get so good at what you do is because you ask the right questions, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I always say, like, always take the mentality of a student. Like, always never feel too big to ask questions, and always try to keep learning.
Yeah, I think we can end up on always try to keep learning, and maybe we can do part 2 in the future. Tell people where they can find you, and maybe we get the course one day.
My name at Justinbieshaar is along all my socials. I'm only not on X. I'm everywhere else, but I'm on TikTok, Instagram, and here on YouTube. But YouTube is still in progress of creating this course one day on there. I still have one course which is about tic-tac-toe,
cool.
because this was also a bit of this shape and form. Like I really like to get people out of this tutorial hell.
All right.
To help people understand, if you create, like I created a tic-tac-toe tutorial to then show what you can do with it. So you can make different types of tic-tac-toe, and then it really went from a basic tic-tac-toe to a whole complicated tic-tac-toe to eventually even Unity creating a 3D, and the Russian doll tic-tac-toe version where you can take over other spots, etc. Like I always say, like you can follow a tutorial, but to get out of tutorial, I'll always create something with it next. So what I hope with my tutorials next is to allow people to create something and then help them to give them an assignment to create something with it the next time. Like try to experiment with it, because that way you really like help yourself understand, like try to see if you really understand it. And if you don't, you can watch the video again and see how it works and then create something with it.
Yeah, what I really like about what you said earlier of like watching a tutorial maybe or a course where they're working with a certain language, but you're actually using the other language and you're trying to translate.
Exactly.
Because like what I do even on my like Let's Learn streams where I just attend someone's course and I try to apply the knowledge. And what I do is I like if they're using Substance Designer, I'm using Material Maker, right? And if they're using Unity, I'm using Unreal. And just the journey of like trying to find what is the feature that is called XYZ in Unreal in Unity or vice versa. That alone gives you a lot of the fundamental knowledge that you were talking about before.
Yeah. And it can also be basic things, like the basic example I think I gave in my tic-tac-toe is like you can make a tic-tac-toe by 3x3 grid, but then if you learned how to make that, then try to make it yourself into a 4x4 grid.
Yeah.
It can be just super simple as that.
Yeah.
But then you at least understand how the grid works, how the algorithm works to find the pattern of who won and who lost, but then in different scenarios. And if you understood it right, also if the course is set up right to make you understand it right, then you should be able to do that.
Yeah.
Because that's also one thing that I hate, before I'm going to end this, but one thing I hate about so many courses that they are so focused on one thing.
Yeah.
That you only know that, but you cannot do anything else with it. Like I've seen so many tic-tac-toe courses that are so hard-coded into a 3x3 grid that I can understand for beginners that it's barely impossible to make a 4x4 grid out of, because the logic is so based on a 3x3. So I think it's important that courses are also a bit more into like having it still simple, but also allow people to understand that this can be scaled to something bigger. Although it can be super easy, it doesn't need to be super complicated.
You're hyping it up.
Yeah,
I'm really
I also
like
understand some.
Yeah, go ahead.
But sometimes course people also want to make it quick, and some course people making course to make quick money. They just know like, oh, I can make this. Make this quick, you can make it quick, then I have my money, you are created this cool thing, and then we're all done. But I think, and that's also a bit of my issue sometimes with making educational content, that I wanted to have a bigger meaning than just like, oh, I learned you this, and then that's it. No, I want you to learn this, and I want you to be able to think about it and create more out of it,
Yeah, but that takes time, of course. You're in your second year making that course. Let's talk about the course privately. I'll wrap it up. Hey everyone, thanks for watching this. If you liked it, leave a like. If you didn't like it, I don't know, we're still here. Subscribe and check out Justin's social media, because he does a lot of like motivational, I feel like motivational, humanizing the whole process. I'll leave your links in the description, and yeah, have a good one, everybody.